Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog podcast. This is your host, Elias Roush. This podcast is sponsored by EliasRoushMedia.com, photo, video, digital media production. Today we are finally talking about the first, I think, nationwide theatrical release, universal release. Finally we're getting some new movies. Tenet 2020, the new Christopher Nolan directed, written, also co-written with Emma Thomas. Quick correction, she is a producer, not a writer. Thank you. But this is a full Christopher Nolan production. Other than that, it's one of the standard ones. Although we do have a couple of newcomers joining us on his ride. Normally we have a different editor for his movies. This time we have Jennifer Lame, the same editor as Hereditary and Manchester by the Sea. And we also have Hoyt Van Hoytenma. I believe I said that right. Sorry if I messed that up, but this is the same cinematographer from Dunkirk and Interstellar, both working on Christopher Nolan's movies, as well as he's worked on Ad Astra as well, and the James Bond film Spectre and Her and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. So this cinematographer is continuing to impress me as well. And so this movie stars John David Washington, the son of Denzel Washington. We've seen him in Black Klansman most recently. And I believe he's kind of a new and up-and-coming guy that is really putting his foot into the acting career. He's also he was a previous football player at he had signed with the St. Louis Rams, I guess. I didn't realize that back in 06. That's pretty crazy. I didn't even know that. So he was most recently Ron Stallworth and Black Klansman 2018, and going on to go into Tenet after this is pretty impressive. I was like, okay, so he's starting to really have some solidified names under his belt, given that he's Denzel's son, and he's not a bad actor. I'll give him that. He's he's got a different kind of charisma than his father, but he definitely has screen presence that I really like. We also have Robert Pattinson as kind of a co-star in this as well, with Elizabeth Debicki and Dimple Kapida. We also have our favorite. I don't want to give too many people away, but let me just kind of preface this by saying we have the majority of our favorites back. We do have Ludwig Göransson taking over the mantle for composer and score composer instead of his normal Hans Zimmer composer. I mean, the dun dun dun, from the Inceptions, from the Prestige, from all of Christopher Nolan's classic movies. I believe even Dunkirk had it as well. But Hans Zimmer has been along the ride in all of the Batman trilogies, obviously. Christopher Nolan has quite a team he likes to put together, and a lot of the regulars and favorites are majority are coming back, but the ones that aren't coming back, he has some pretty good stand-ins and people that are replacing them just temporarily, or maybe even for future projects as well. So anyways, let's talk about Tenet, the 2020 movie that I got to see. It's very difficult to see certain movies in certain states, so sometimes like myself, you have to travel to a different state to go see the movie safely. So, preface this by saying, only go to the movies if you absolutely think it's safe, and you absolutely think they are taking the steps and precautions to socially distance, to regulate, to make sure that, things are being contained in a way, the place I went, no one was even there. So it was like, there's less people in the movie theater at this point than there are in any gas station or grocery store in most places. Now that might not be the case for where you live, so obviously check with your local theater. So let's talk about Tenet, the 2020. Preface this by saying there's not spoilers in this section, but we are going to talk about the plot of the film, which is something I didn't even want to talk about before watching the movie. So if you have not seen it, you don't want to know anything about the movie, Spoiler, non-spoiler. This is going to be a non-spoiler section. However, we will talk about a spoiler section here in a few minutes. But I will clearly mark that for you. So right now we are going to discuss the 2020 Tenet film with just minor synopsis details about what's going on, and then we'll go into a little bit more spoiler-filled, heavy, centric conversation here in a minute. Tenet, written and directed by. Tenet is written and directed by Christopher Nolan, the guy that is always coming up with the crazy time concepts, the crazy obscure movies that make us think and our heads spin, and coming out of the movies like, what the hell did we just watch? Well, yeah, this is exactly what you're expecting with this kind of movie. Tenet is the 2020 spy film in which the protagonist is trying to stop World War III by going through time. So, in a sense, I would say this is a movie about, well, it's a movie if you have Christopher Nolan directing the plot of Back to the Future. And you combine those two things, and that's essentially what Tenet is. It is definitely a technical feature that needs to be seen on probably the biggest screen possible. If you can't see it in your theaters, they see it in like the biggest screen you can, loudest. You need to be able to hear what's going on. Things are happening so fast in this 2 hours and 24 minutes. Christopher Nolan is always known for having time manipulation in his movies. This one especially. So, for those people that want to continue talking about this, still a non-spoiler, but want to talk about a little bit more about the plot of what exactly are we getting into, let's talk about it. So, Tenet, let's talk about the pros real quick. So the pros of Tenet are that Christopher Nolan is always trying to shoot for the stars in a way that is quite always, well, normally quite dazzling in a way. You have our space features such as Interstellar, our time and dream sequences such as Inception, and then we have memory and distortion and manipulation and Memento, and we'd have a little bit of magic in the Prestige. I mean, there's so many different types of technical features that Christopher Nolan is constantly trying to impress the audience with. It is always an experience to go see a Christopher Nolan film, whether you find it enjoyable or not. I always find that people always say this is certainly not always challenging, but it can be quite a feature to tackle. It's not something you want to walk in with low energy to. You want to have a full cup of coffee. You want to have your notes ready to take. You're going to want to watch this several times. This is the kind of movie that is going to require multiple viewings. And so, with saying that, the cinematography is absolutely beautiful in this, as always, as all of his movies are beautiful. They look like works of art. The action is phenomenal. I'm going to talk about the time manipulation here in a second, but the way that the action is happening, it's shot in pretty much what feels like you're watching the entire movie in reverse. Well, not just the movie in reverse, but you're going to watch an action scene happen in reverse, or happen before it even happens, or even from a different perspective. And so it's a little bit confusing in the way that I'm trying to say it. But I mean, two people will walk in a room and one person has already had this fight and the other person has no idea what's going on. So it's like, if you have that in your head, you're like, oh my gosh, this is like some crazy shit going on. Now, I remember as far back as, what was the movie? I'm gonna it doesn't matter. I can't find, it wasn't Waterworld, but I was looking for some sort of movie that had that same feature. Okay, so let me just talk about. So yes, everyone knows that Christopher Nolan's movies look excellent. There's no doubt in that, and the fact that they always have mind-bending elements about it that make the story compelling to a way that you've never heard or seen it told before. This has absolutely got that. Now let's talk about the problem. Just basically my single solidified problem. Maybe it's kind of branched off into the writing section as well. The fact is, I don't find these main characters to be compelling enough, or that I care about their livelihood, whether they make it or not. I mean, obviously, you want the good guy to make it. But the thing is, there is so much plot that happens in this first hour that they have to explain the world, bring the characters, show what the problem is, how are we going to fix the problem. And that second hour is basically just completing all, is trying to complete these tasks, obviously. Now, with kind of keeping it spoiler free as much as possible, I will say it's absolutely crucial that you probably watch this 2 or 3 times, because you're going to be lost in certain scenes that you're walking in and you're like, wait, what's going on? And then you come back to it and you're like, now it's all explained. And so there is that element of having to rewatch it. A lot of his movies have that. They have the totems that they like, the little pieces of intricacy that, the Inception had the top, and this has elements that they need to grab to for time purposes and whatnot. Kind of dancing around what the plot actually is going on. But overall, I will say the biggest problem about this movie is the fact that they do not have very juicy characters in a way. Like, the reasoning you cared about Leo's character in Inception is because he has a family. He has someone we care about. He kind of has some sort of, I don't want to say personality, but we kind of understand who he is and his motivations. I felt like after the first viewing of Tenet, I did not 100% understand the motivations of our protagonist, why he was here. I might need to go back and rewatch, or I might even have in my notes that we talk about in the spoiler section that of why he's there. But overall, I felt like a lot of this movie went over my head in a way that I was just like, yeah, this is great, but why do you care? Did I completely miss the part where this is the reasoning that he's in this position? The reason I'm comparing it to Inception is because they're very similar in style. The difference is Leo's character is more understanding, in my opinion, to why he's doing this job. I felt like I didn't understand why the protagonist was doing this job, why he had to be the protagonist, So yeah, that was my biggest problem with Tenet. I had gone in it hearing some loose things that, it was the normal Nolan problems. It's the exposition heavy between two characters, the walk and talks that kind of give us the recaps of what's going on in the movie. Yeah, this movie definitely has the walk and talks with the recontextualizing of what's going on in this movie. So yeah, I definitely see the complaints and when people talk about that. So let's talk about this a little bit in the spoiler section so I can kind of give you a full brief of what's going on. I'm actually going to go to the Wikipedia page and do the full plot so that I know what's going on for my sanity, because after 2.5 hours I was like, what in the world did I just watch? Like, I was mind blown in many ways, but I was like, I also have about 2/3 of no idea what the hell just happened. Even with taking notes, I was like, what? So yeah, here's the plot for Tenet 2020 with spoilers coming up right now. An unnamed CIA agent participates in an undercover SWAT operation at a Ukrainian opera house, recruiting an exposed spy and stealing a strange artifact he has saved from being shot by a masked soldier with a distinctive red tag on his rucksack. I think we know who that is now. The protagonist is captured and tortured before consuming a cyanide pill. He later awakens, learns the pill was fake, his colleagues are dead, the artifact was taken, and that the mission was a test. The protagonist's boss points him to a secret organization called Tenet, leading him to Laura, a scientist studying bullets whose entropy has been inverted. So they move backwards through time. The protagonist traces the bullets to Pyra. Am I saying that right? I don't know. Pyra. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. An arms dealer in Mumbai and member of Tenet. With the help of Neil, a supposed local, the protagonist infiltrates Pyra's compound and learns the bullets are supplied by a Russian oligarch, Andrei Sator, who is communicating with the future. The protagonist meets Sator's estranged wife, Kat. He discovers Sator is blackmailing Kat with a forged painting she had sold him to keep her from their son. Kat adds that the last time she and Sator were truly happy was on their yacht in Vietnam, where she later saw another woman dive from the ship. It's all starting to make sense. The protagonist and Neil work from fixer Meyer to steal the painting from the storage facility at Oslo Airport. Inside the facility, they find a machine from which two masked men emerge, one of which is inverted. Neil fights and unmasks the normal one, then stops the protagonist from killing the inverted one. Pyra later explains that the machine was a turnstile, a time inversion device developed in the future, and that two masked men might be the same person. The protagonist lies to Kat that the painting was destroyed, and she arranges a meeting with Sator. Sator reveals that he had the painting moved before the crash, during a boating trip. Kat attempts to drown the Sator during the boating trip, but the protagonist saves him. The protagonist offers to steal a case of plutonium. The protagonist offers to steal a case of plutonium Sator desires in exchange for Kat's freedom. The protagonist and Neil steal the plutonium from an armored convoy, but realize it is actually another artifact. An inverted Sator captures both the protagonist and Kat, mortally wounds her with an inverted bullet, and forces him to reveal where the artifact is. After Sator leaves a team of Tenet operatives led by Ives Freeze, the protagonist, Neil admits being part of Tenet to save Kat from death. The protagonist and Neil take her through Sator's turnstile. They travel back to Oslo's airport crash a week earlier and uninvert themselves inside the turnstile there. As they infiltrate the airport, the inverted protagonist fights his non-inverted self before reaching the turnstile and uninverting himself. So this is a lot of stuff that's starting to make more sense, that they're going back in time essentially through the first hour of the movie and undoing a lot of what they were trying to do at some point, or trying to help or fix the situation. Priya explains the artifacts are capable of future developed algorithm, capable of catastrophically inverting the entire world, and that future humans wish to activate it to prevent the effects of global warming. It's always a global warming message. Always comes back to the y'all are gonna be like, oh, the damn libs. Cat reveals that Sator is dying from inoperable pancreatic cancer, and deduces that he will activate the algorithm on the moment of his death via a dead man switch, believing the world should die with him. Cat suspects Sator will choose to die when he was most happy, their day in Vietnam. Cat inverts back in time to delay Sator's death, while Tenet tracks the assembled algorithm to an abandoned Soviet closed city and commences a temporal pincer movement, where half of the troops move forward in time to the blast zone, while the other half moves backwards. The protagonists and Ives are prevented from reaching the algorithm by a locked gate, until an inverted masked corpse with a familiar red tag on its rucksack springs to life, saving the protagonist from a gunshot and unlocking the gate. Cat prematurely kills Sator just as the protagonist and Ives deactivate the algorithm. Cat dives from the yacht deck where she is witnessed by her past self. The protagonist, Neil, and Ives break up the algorithm's components and part ways. The protagonist notices a red tag on Neil's rucksack. Neil reveals that a future version of the protagonist recruited him to Tenet years earlier, and this mission is the end of a long friendship. End of a long friendship that the protagonist has yet to experience. In London, Priya attempts to kill Cat, but is killed by the protagonist, who has realized he is the future mastermind behind Tenet. He watches Cat reunite with her son. And that is all she wrote. So, yeah, like half that I was like, wait, who, what, when, where? So, like, scenes would happen. This is all spoilers, by the way. You just listen to that entire plot, so you should know spoilers. But scenes would happen within the movie, and I was like, what is going on? But essentially, we were watching the entire scene in reverse, and then we'd come back to it in later in the movie, and we would see it play out in time, and it'd be like, whoa, whoa, it's all coming back. Like it's the onion thing, it's the burrito thing. It's got layers. So, let me just talk about real quickly about the notes. About y'all probably tired of me just blabbering on about this time bullshit. I don't know. Right at the beginning, instantly pulse pounding with music and editing that is to die for. It's just like this is what I came for. I was like, this is my shit. Why do I only get 2 hours of Nolan every 2 years or something like that? 3 years. It's ridiculous. I need more. Yeah, those damn violins, like ding, 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 like they were straight getting it. I mean, he wakes up at the very beginning. The protagonist does, sleeping. So we should already kind of be in a mind of like, oh shit, something's definitely not right. Yeah, and he's working for the new company, Tenet. Ends up being a test. We find that out. Preventing World War III. I was like, damn, these inverted bullets are pretty cool. But I was thinking, this is a really cheap way to show a really easy effect. As a matter of fact, real quick story. Back in high school, we had Star Wars. And Shakespeare. We had to make some sort of movie together. So I was like, it's going to have a lightsaber battle. So one of the coolest effects that I had was, I was like, ding, ding, ding. So one of the effects I had was throwing the lightsaber down and making it look like he was using the Force to bring it back. And so this is this is a technique used in film and has been used in film as early as the er, uh, early 1920s and probably late 1800s. Movies have been reversing film for as long as I can even think about it. And it's crazy to think about no one's really gone through and said that we should do an action film that way. I can't think of too many action films that show a reverse explosion and a reverse, ass beating or reverse something or another, bullets happening. I mean, that is very cool. And I didn't see the trailer for this before I went to the movie, so I was very glad that I didn't. I'm actually about to watch it here in a second just to see if they kind of spoil what the premise is. But yeah, so I was like, how are they sending him this stuff? I was a little bit confused, even reading the plot back over. I was like, how are they reversing the bullets? I was like, the machine that was doing it didn't seem entirely plausible to me. Like I mean, obviously it's not a real thing, it's made up, but I was like, I don't see where they're manufacturing these things. Like, how are they manufacturing the bullets? I felt like I was a little bit lost on that. Maybe they showed it, maybe they didn't, maybe, I don't know. But the thing about this movie is it has very quick, subtle shots that they're just left there. You're like, wait, what? Why did he do that? Who is that jumping off the boat? Why is that happening? Who's in that car? Like, small little shots that you're like, why didn't Robert Pattinson go and whoop that guy's ass after he threw him back? And so it goes back and shows you from a different perspective very much that you're like, oh shit, that was them the whole time. And so that's the great thing about watching Nolan movies, because when you watch the first time, you're like, oh shit, that was quite an experience. The second time, you're like, oh my Lanta. It's like, you're seeing it for the first time. So yes, what else do we have? The backwards airplane gold heist, which it was more or less about the paintings, but I called it the gold heist. Very cool to watch. Looks expensive as hell. This is a straight up Bond film if I ever seen one. And everyone's talking about Robert Pattinson playing the Batman in the next movie, and Christopher Nolan's been the previous director of some of the best Batmans that have come out before. It was just kind of ironic. It definitely felt like this is all still happening in the same world. What else do we have? Action scenes in reverse. I was like, this is insanity. I need to go back and rewatch it just to see what actually happened. And it makes me wonder, did they just shoot the actual film regularly and then reverse it in post? Like, I've got so many questions about how this was actually shot. I want to see a documentary or some sort of like behind the scenes thing about how this was really going on. So yeah, he kept the photo. He lied about the picture being destroyed. Wife tries to kill husband. Next scene, definitely can't let that happen. Then there's plutonium that is introduced in this. Let's see. That guy that got beat with the gold bar, he's like, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Reverse or not, that would have hurt. What else do we have? I did notice there seemed to be a lot of exposition coming from David Washington's character, the protagonist, and Robert Pattinson's character, Neil, to gear the audience in the headspace of where we're at and what is happening, almost like a recap. I don't know. Like, I'm just trying to think. I like these two guys. I like these two actors. It's just Nolan gave them next to nothing that really geared us to being sympathetic of either one of these guys, in my opinion. I felt like I didn't understand why they were who they were. They just were. And I had a fun time watching it, but it's like, at the end of the movie, I'm like, wait a minute. Who are you? Who are you again? Like, after 2.5 hours, I still very much feel like, I don't know. So yeah, that was that. They very much felt like walk and talks with our protagonist and Neil character, but it was all having to do with the plot, and no character building. I felt like the character building on these two guys. So, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I kind of understand what the problem is. There is an hour of actual movie here. And that whole second hour is them jumping back in that first hour and looking at it from different perspectives. And there's just not enough time in the day or in the movie or however, no matter how much you manipulate the time, there's just not enough time to have them explain who they are without telling the audience, this is who they are. And so that's where it kind of feels like it's compressed in a way. I almost wish this was like a mini series of like 5 hours. I guarantee you there's probably at least a 4 or 5 hour cut of this, and they just had to cut. But I just felt like the heart of the movie was erased if they took any of the small remarks that would have had to do with who these guys were as characters. They had to keep the Neil character at arm's length because there needed to be a big reveal about who he was at the end, but it also sacrificed who he was as a character, and there wasn't any like for me there was not enough meat on the bone, like there was in like his previous movies such as Inception, where it felt like it wasn't ragtag team of guys, but it was this team of like elite professionals that felt like they had maybe worked together at some point, and they were coming back together not to do one last heist or something, but it was coming back, bringing the team back together. This doesn't feel like you're bringing the team back together. It doesn't feel like it's bouncing back and forth, co-star and lead kind of buddy cop time flick or something like that. It's not like that. It's way more serious than any of that, and I think that it probably could have benefited from just having a little bit of holy shitness in this, because like I felt like half the time I was like, do you see this shit, man? And it's like I wanted to like shake somebody to be like, do you see this shot? Do you see this? And I felt like there was never a moment that David Washington as the protagonist or Robert Pattinson was ever like, holy shit, like I would be losing my freaking mind. And I felt like I know I'm saying I felt like too much. I'm aware. Ellen Page was that character, the proxy for the character of us as the viewer, to kind of be like, oh my gosh, this is a pretty cool world we're living in. But it felt like David Washington was like, yep, reverse bullets, yep, that sounds good. And Pattinson giving me next to no information, yep, that's good too. Grandfather paradox, yep, that sounds like it was like there was no questioning of what was going on with this reality and world. And I felt like I would have been like, what the fuck, what are the repercussions of all this happening? And I felt like there was so much world building you had to press in there that just was not enough room for the story. And I'm kind of just now getting this out. Let's see what else we have. Okay, so the husband, played by, what is his name? I'm going to have to pull his name up in 2 seconds. Just get a hack in the network. Okay, so Kenneth Branagh played Andre Sator. Anybody that doesn't recognize this guy for a long time, that you're like, oh, this guy kind of looks familiar. I was like, this guy looks so familiar. It's one of your favorite characters from the Dark Arts in Harry Potter. He played a Professor Gilroy Lockhart in The Chamber of Secrets, and he was one of the highlights of that movie, if I can remember correctly. And seeing him menacing, just being absolutely menacing on this, is just like, holy shit. He's on another level. We have Michael Caine back as Michael Crosby. I don't think Michael Crosby was in Inception, but I'm pretty sure he was not. But he basically plays the same character, just a little bit of exposition and kind of just like, this is what you're fighting for kind of thing. So yeah, I was kind of surprised about Kenneth Branagh's character just being so fucking menacing. I was like, but We also have Aaron Taylor Johnson in this as Ives. He just feels like a kind of a side character that is very underwritten. I still don't really know his motivations. Um, Elizabeth Debicki as Kat. Really like her. Really like her. I'm not sure if I 100% enjoyed the portrayal of how much shit she got in this movie. Like, just shot, beaten, just abused, terrible husband. Uh, but I felt like generally she had like the upper hand by the end of the movie. I'd have to go through a few podcasts, watched a few times, maybe. I don't know if it would pass like the Backtail test or anything like that. Like I don't. She's probably always talking about a male protagonist on screen. Like she doesn't have any full motivations besides leaving this guy, and I kind of wish the characters are just very thin in my opinion. And keep in mind, I love Christopher Nolan. He's one of my go-to directors. When I say I wanted to be a director, he's one of the reasons. So when I see that there are problems with his movies, there are problems with Inception, there are problems with Interstellar, even though I love them, the movies and the direction and everything about them, there clearly are problems, and Tenet has problems as well. So we can be fanboys, but we can also be fanboys, fangirls, whoever, fan dogs, cats, I don't know. But the main thing is we can be, critical of movies that we can still love. I don't know if I love this movie yet, but I still think it's quite an achievement. So yeah, there's the split scene after the wreck, shown in reverse from two different perspectives. I was very blown away and confused at the same time about what the hell was going on. The thing was, you would walk into a room and you'd be like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happened, but it's gonna happen. And it's like, and then he's like doing some crazy shit all of a sudden. And basically, it's like trying to be a detective, but before it happens. And it kind of reminds me a little bit like Hannibal. I'm having flashbacks a little bit now. I'm thinking about it. Hannibal had kind of reverse murders that he would try to play in his head. He would say, how did the murder happen? And so it's kind of in the same way of, you're like, how did this bullet get here? If right there, if this happened right there, it's like, and then you see the whole thing happen in reverse. It is some very impressive stuff and confusing at the same time. This is when it happens. You need that second watch, that second and third watch. And so this is where I realized that I think David Washington never has that like holy shit moment. Like at several times he looks concerned, but I never feel like he's like I'd be screaming like fuck, like I would be just like mind blown the entire time. So we see Washington tries to change the car race at a certain point. Once the car race has already happened and he's trying to jump in the car, and then we go into the reverse rooms, and then some crazy interviewing happens, and then the Tenet guys come in. They're like, all right, Dave Washington's, all right, we got to go back into the car race that just happened. I need to go back in time, put the face mask on, and basically try to stop everything from happening. He does not succeed, I don't think. And yeah, and now we're trying to figure out the grandfather paradox, which is like, what happens if you killed your grandfather? Would you still be there back in the day or in the future and stuff like that? I know it's fucking confusing. I didn't make this shit up. Blame Nolan, not me. So fast forward back to the plane scene again. So this is back when, after they've discussed the grandfather paradox, and they're going back to the plane, and they're going to to fight their younger selves when they're in the room, the painting, when the paintings are being exploded and whatnot, or sorry, when it's being gassed. And so that is another very impressive scene. That's where we have the action scene in reverse again, where they're fighting themselves, and Pattinson is throwing. He throws the SWAT team member that looks like the protagonist on the ground, and he realizes as the protagonist that he's actually back in time as well. And so that is another scene that is elongated the first time you see it. It's like, wait, why is that scene so long at the first time you watched it? And you're like, where did that guy even go? And so that's all explained here, that Pattinson kind of knows throughout the movie loosely what's going to happen has already happened. So yeah, I did think it was weird that they didn't show the guys in the mask that they were fighting originally, but it ended up because there was a reason. It was themselves. It's thinking like, who do you root for in a situation like that? Their past selves or old, new selves or old selves? And a Marvel movie not too long ago, within the last year or two ago, had a very similar scene of two superheroes fighting them, an older self and a younger self, and it was very fun. It was very cool. Kind of reminded me of that. So what else do we have on here? Yeah, so where am I? Yeah, by this point I was like, I'm gonna need a second watch and a third watch at this point. What has happened has happened. So this is when we find out he has a dead man switch, pancreatic cancer. This is where Kat's telling us all this. I was confused about how Kat was okay from the reverse bullet at this point. Just this whole section, I was just like, oh, my brain hurts. It's mush. It was like trying to understand like psychology and physics all at the same time. It was like so many things that were happening. I was like, okay, she's fine now. I'm just going to take that as is. And I realized Nolan can't keep masks off people. Ever since Bane, he's had masks all over people. So this time we have masks on people as well. Let's see. So we have this reversed war scene that is just phenomenal to watch. Like seeing things in one direction, blowing up, buildings being destroyed, and then coming back together in the same scene. It's just like, what is going on, man? The only way you really know what's going on is by the color coding the army guys, and that one's blue, one's red team. It's like, I guess that's the best way to mark who these guys are. At about 20 minutes into the war scene at the very end, I was like, where is everybody? Where are my favorite characters? And I realized I just couldn't see them because they had masks on. I was like, ugh. I'm not looking forward to a freaking plethora of movies where we can't see the actors' faces. It just feels like I don't even know who I'm watching at this point. But yeah, so we find out Sator's crazy. He thinks he's a god. Really doesn't make much sense when it comes down to the themes of it. It's like he has pancreatic cancer, so he wants everyone to die. Like what was what was the thinking in this? This just sounds like a waste of time. Couldn't you have been doing something way more productive with your money, or just enjoying fucking being on a yacht? Like, geez Louise. But anyway, he ends up getting bucked up by by Kat. Pow pow, straight to the chest. I think it was just one shot, so it's just a single pow. But got him anyway. Straight to the straight to the, I was going to say throat, but I think it was the chest. Throws him off the yacht and, his, what's his neck at the same time. It looked pretty painful. So he's definitely dead, being dragged by the boat at the end. Kat sees herself jumping off the boat. I'm sure she's still got, her younger self is going to have questions about who the heck that lady was jumping off the boat, and then all of a sudden the husband's gone. A lot of questions. I kind of wish we would have gotten a little zoom in on, or a close up on the on Kat's younger self, so she knew that it was her older self. I don't think she has confirmation at all. Let's see. So Pattinson says this is the end of a beautiful friendship, and I guess is the beginning of his, or beginning of, I don't know. There's so much timey-wimey shit in this. I'm not even gonna attempt to try to explain it 100%. This is just it's another one. So yeah, in conclusion, I will say Tenet, very highly well produced, well directed. It's got thin characters, and they need a little bit more juice on the bone just to kind of sympathize and empathize with the characters. So, thank you for listening, watching Lucky Dog Podcast. Check out all the Lucky Dog podcasts you can on SoundCloud. You can check them out early on YouTube. We produce them live also on Twitch. Check out the description below for all of the social medias. If you want to donate, paypal.me/the Lucky Dog Podcast. Thank you for listening, watching Lucky Dog Podcast. Take it easy.